What is good? Welcome back to another podcast. I've recently had a few conversations with clients about this whole idea of moving away from chasing maximum physique development or optimal outcomes, what we'd call bodybuilding training, into more of like a lifestyle approach. And this is something I'm seeing honestly more and more with clients, especially guys around my age who still want to look great year round. They still want to make fantastic progress, but they don't want to quote unquote be optimal and would rather introduce a little bit of what we could call suboptimal stuff into their plan, whether that be through training, nutrition, or lifestyle. And that honestly begs the question, is it truly not optimal? Because if you love it, I personally believe that the most optimal plan is the one that is the most optimal for you. And depending on the person, that can look very different from what we'd typically classify as a perfect plan. And I think what we tend to see is people fall out of love with, let's say, hardcore physique development or bodybuilding. They go too far overboard on one end of the extreme and say at the beginning it's awesome. They have this passion for it. Maybe they set a goal to compete. And then after doing some more internal work, maybe maturing a little bit, they realize it's not actually something they 100% enjoy. And how do I know this? Well, that is from personal experience as well. My first, honestly, couple years after I lost 60 pounds, I immediately wanted to compete. And looking back, I don't know if it was the goal of competing itself, or if that just gave me purpose, or if it was more the ideal of getting shredded. So I went ahead, hired my first bodybuilding coach, natural bodybuilding coach, went all in, and then 1, 2 years later, kind of fell out of love with the process. And I've said this multiple times, bodybuilding or physique development is not the problem. It's your relationship with it. So what I don't want people to do, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but I really don't want to see people just completely neglect their training, their nutrition, all of these factors which brought myself such great physique results in the first place, just because they decided to take a step back. You can still incorporate your training and nutrition within the framework of a lifestyle approach, not necessarily going for maximum outcomes. You still want to look good, but you don't have maximum outcomes. And that's where this sliding spectrum thing comes across. It's not just either 100% all in or go back to terrible habits. It operates on a spectrum where you can just, let's say there are different seasons, slide up the spectrum and say you want to pull back a little bit, you slide down. So you say, I'm going to accept a little bit less results, but I'm going to be much happier with how that fits into the global context of my life. So say your priorities change, therefore training, nutrition, your whole lifestyle, all of that should change as well to allow you to still get fantastic physique progression, but you can now just make tweaks to how you go about those factors in order to still get good physique outcomes whilst incorporating it into the context of your life. Like I said, and something I'm personally going through, you're going to have different priorities. Maybe you have less time. Maybe I love the frame of treating your life as seasons. Maybe one season of your life, you're all in on building your physique. Then another season, all in on building your business. Well, your physique may have to take a step back. Things are going to change. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about today in this episode. How we're going to achieve that balance between still training hard, still making good progress, still staying in shape, but doing it in a way that actually fits your life and also your enjoyment. So let's talk training first, because I think this is probably the biggest shift for most people moving from that bodybuilding maximum outcome mindset to more of a lifestyle approach. Because when you're looking for optimal physique outcomes, training is going to be a massive piece, maybe a centerpiece of your life. I mean, for obvious reasons, it's the stimulus, it's the catalyst for growth. But moving towards the lifestyle side, there are some considerations we probably want to look at. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you keeping training the exact same. You could train the exact same way you did when you were going for maximum outcomes. So that might be like 5, 6, or 4 to 6 sessions a week. Decent amount of volume. You're still training very hard, making sure that's on point. That could be exactly the same as what you do as a lifestyle lifter. That could stay exactly the same as you move more into the lifestyle approach. However, what I've done with a lot of clients is what we tend to do is reduce down our training frequency, so the time we spend training, and also the importance of it in our life as other things start to take priority. Whereas someone chasing maximum physique development, training is the centerpiece probably of their day, the highlight maybe of your week. And it might not be as you go into lifestyle. You might have family, you might have serious work commitments. Again, you might be more focused on your business. You might have a multitude of other things which are going to drag you away from training. Therefore, takes a lower priority in the scheme of your life. And I think you should always have it there. I think it's going to be very beneficial from a mental health standpoint, obviously, overall health standpoint, But again, just having it as a lower priority in your life, completely understandable. So I think moving away from the concept of I have to train a certain amount of days is so key. If you're training 3 to 5 days a week, that is going to be more than enough. That is optimal for most people. Now, personally, I currently train 4 days a week, and I can see myself sticking to that for the foreseeable future. But that doesn't mean if I have a season of my life where, say, I'm traveling or more focused on my business, I would potentially move down to 3 days a week and reorganize my training accordingly. So at the moment, I do an upper lower split, and that could just move down to, if I were to go 3 times a week, full body split. And as we know, training is just a way of organizing your work across the week. A program, just a way of organizing your training. So let's say we're doing 16 sets per body part across the week, which, to be fair, that's a quite high volume approach in my personal opinion. You're going to find a way to distribute that across however many days you train. So say you're doing a push-pull leg split, you're going to distribute that 16 sets across more days versus an upper lower split where you can still do the same work. It'll just be less days, and that's absolutely fine. If you're someone who has the goal to compete, let's say, I'm going to prescribe a different program than someone who's just going to stay in decent shape as like a lifestyle guy for fairly obvious reasons. So frequency wise, train as many days as you can consistently commit to. That's absolutely fine. And I think the biggest factor outside of that is time per session. So how long you're in the gym. Long gone are the days where you're going to be able to get in, let's say, 2.5 hours in the gym. And again, I wouldn't even consider that optimal. And if it doesn't align with your goals, doesn't align with your life, why do it, in my opinion? So think about distribution of time and going, okay, how can I make this session as time efficient as possible? We can reduce your total weekly volume of sets. So moving to something like 8 to 12 sets per body part. Very, very sensible approach. I do this actually a lot with my lifestyle guys. As long as you're training very close to failure, at that point, we know there's an inverse relationship between intensity and volume. I would say you're probably going to have to train 1 to 0 reps in reserve for the most part if you're doing a lower volume approach. And you can use more intensifiers as well. I'm a big fan of myoreps because it lets you cram a bunch of effective reps into one set. So say you were going to go in, you have 3 sets of lateral raises. You could do one myorep set with 3 mini rests and still accumulate those effective reps of that 3 sets in one set, which would be like 25% of the time. So for someone busy, that works exceptionally well. You can get a session done in, let's say, 40, 45 minutes, but get the total work you would have got done in an hour, hour and a half session. It's super easy to implement as well. Drop sets as well, rest pause sets, anything where we're getting lots of work done in a short space of time while still training hard enough to create the stimulus. However, I will say, I do tend to favor myoreps and rest pauses over drop sets. Now, when it comes to exercise selection, which is probably the least important factor as we move into more of a lifestyle approach, and exercise selection ultimately, what you enjoy at the end of the day. You haven't got a reason for doing any specific exercises anymore. You're not trying to get the most growth out of said body part. So trying to pick out the most optimal exercises, like does it need to be a cable lateral raise versus a dumbbell lateral raise, or a dumbbell curl versus a cable curl? Well, what if you prefer doing dumbbell lateral raises? I mean, who cares at this point? It's whatever you enjoy. And I think this is where people get very confused because they got their favorite bodybuilder or influencer saying you need to do this exercise or this is the most optimal exercise. Well, if you love it, by all means, go do it. But it might not be the thing that you want to do anymore because you're not chasing maximum development. So as an example, for myself, everyone's gone, you need to RDL or hip hinge if you want to get a big back and hamstrings. And I'm like, well, I had an RDL in my plan for 2 years, again, when I was like hardcore bodybuilding, 2 years straight. And to be honest, I'd rather do stuff I enjoy because I actually want to go to the gym. So I'll just do, let's say, a hip extension machine, and then I'll get my back work done through actual back movements, rows, pull downs, whatever. Now, is that optimal? Maybe not. There could be an argument made that it actually is, but it also has a higher injury risk, and getting injured doesn't contribute to my life at all. So picking things that you enjoy, especially if you're in that lifestyle mindset, is going to be incredibly important to your longevity in doing this. So don't feel like you have to do any specific exercises. Maybe, let's say, you were powerlifting. You had a squat, bench, and deadlift. Now you got the freedom to go, you know what? Don't actually enjoy barbell squats. I'm going to do hack squats instead, or Smith squats, or leg press, or whatever you prefer. So those are kind of the main things I'd look at in regards to training and programming. A program, just a way of organizing training. Just have a static volume target, and you can also auto-regulate that across the week. You might want to do 3 sets of an exercise today, maybe just 2 sets the following day because you're not feeling it. You might feel fantastic, and do 4 or 5, let yourself go with the flow, basically. Now on to nutrition for a lifestyle approach. And this is a big one where people tend to mess up. Typically, as someone chasing maximum development, you're going to be eating, let's say, 4, likely 5 to 6 meals a day, protein at every single meal, potentially a very high caloric intake when you're in a bulk or gaining phase, potentially a very low caloric intake when you're at a dieting phase, depending on the level of condition you're after. So your caloric intake kind of all over the place depending on where you are in your phase and training cycle. You can kind of see what it looks like moving from very high to very low caloric intakes, subsequent body fats, and the highs and lows of them both, and the physical and potential mental stress associated with that. And it may not be sustainable. So for a lot of people that transition into a lifestyle approach, they're going to be sitting around maintenance most of the time, maintaining their physique year round, or maybe they're in a very, very small surplus looking for a rate of gain at 0.25% of their body weight, which is a slow and very steady approach that, yes, might sacrifice some gains. However, they're going to be staying lean, and that's more important to them than getting optimal muscle growth outcomes, because you don't really have to go through these highs and lows and extremes anymore. Most people just want to look good year round and just sit in there. If you want to add a bit of size over time, slowly increase your calories. If you want to lean out a bit, slowly decrease your calories. So you're not having these massive swings back and forth. It might be you're maintaining at maintenance, wherever that is for you, let's say 2,800 calories or something. And if you want to lean out, maybe a bit for summer, maybe you go into like a 200, 300 calorie deficit, nothing crazy. Aim for, let's say, 0.25 to 1 pound per week rate of loss. That's going to mean your deficit isn't going to be enormous. You can still incorporate social events, going out, all these things. And again, because it's not so extreme, you can maintain a body fat percentage and aesthetic that you're comfortable with year round. Now, in terms of meal frequency, we can definitely drop that down. There's probably going to be a limited return on investment past a certain point. Like, let's say 6 meals a day, probably going to be overkill for most people. 4 meals a day, probably going to be most optimal for most individuals. Some guys might even go down to 3 meals, but I wouldn't suggest going anything lower than that. But 3 to 4 meals a day, going to be absolutely fine. Again, you're not chasing maximum muscle protein synthesis around the clock anymore. You're just maintaining what you've built and maybe slowly adding to it over time. Protein, you're definitely going to still want to hit around 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. Maybe you can get away with slightly lower if you're just maintaining, but I'd still keep it around that 1 gram per pound range just to make sure you're kind of preserving and building along the way. And honestly, at that point, it's more about consistency than perfection. You really don't need to be stressing exactly about hitting 187 grams of protein every single day. If you're somewhere in that ballpark most days, you're going to be absolutely fine. And then also moving away from off-plan meals, which sounds funny because it's just a meal. There's no such thing as like a on-plan or off-plan really. But you may have 1 or 2 or 3 meals a week that are more flexible. You might incorporate 2 or 3 meals that aren't perfectly measured or tracked to the T, because you're building your relationship with food. You're moving away from this idea that you have to eat perfectly all the time. And that also is key and also takes time and is a skill. And the one thing I will say here is I still think that tracking, at least loosely, even if you're not chasing maximum physique outcomes, having some level of awareness and control, quite beneficial. So I wouldn't just go completely off the rails and just never track anything. But you don't need to be weighing every single gram of food on the scale anymore if that doesn't align with your goals. You can definitely start to eyeball things, especially if you spent quite a bit of time measuring your food. You've learned what, okay, X amount of protein looks like. You can be a bit more flexible. You can basically play nutrition Tetris on most days where you've got a rough idea of what you're hitting, but you're not stressing about it anymore. And the same rules still apply for food quality. We still want to incorporate a lot of fruits, a lot of vegetables. I'd set a baseline target for most males at about 500 grams to 1,000 grams of fruits and vegetables per day, and females about 750 grams, obviously assuming they're smaller on average. But hitting that target just for general health, just how you're going to feel if you're after still mental performance as well, is going to be super important. Staying hydrated as well, getting your micronutrients in, and you're probably going to be absolutely fine. And you can always adjust over the course of the year. So maybe certain part of the year, as it comes closer to summer, you tighten things up a bit to get leaner. Then you pull back and relax through the summer. Maybe in the winter, you go tighten things up again, put on a little bit of size, and go through these phases or seasons of being more restrictive versus less restrictive, basically just based on what's happening in your life. Now, I also do want to touch on this whole debate about training for fun versus training for optimal results, because I do think there's a lot of confusion about this. And I think a lot of people, they think it's a binary choice, that either you're having fun or you're getting results, but not both for some reason. And I don't think that's true at all. Like, for a lot of people, those circles actually overlap almost completely. If you're a beginner, pretty much anything you do that is fun is also going to work pretty well for your results, because you are so responsive to the stimulus in the beginning that it almost doesn't matter what you do, you're going to grow. And if you love bodybuilding, you love chasing maximum outcomes, like generally love the process of chasing optimal, then fun and optimal are basically the exact same thing for you. You enjoy doing the hard sets, you enjoy the progressive overload week to week, tracking your training, you enjoy that whole pursuit, getting perfect alignment, optimizing your biomechanics on every exercise. So there really is no contradiction. The chase of being optimal is your fun. But I think the contradiction comes in when results are very important to you, but your training doesn't actually reflect that. And I see this pretty often. People will say they care deeply about their physique. They want to look better, they want to build muscle, they want to drop body fat. But then you watch them train and it's like, are you actually training? Like, are you trying? I'm not saying you need to be miserable in the gym. I'm not one of those like no pain, no gain hardcore guys who thinks you need to suffer to make progress. That is some complete nonsense. But there is a difference between enjoying your training and just going through the motions. So imagine someone's in the gym 5-6 days a week. They're talking about how dedicated they are. But when you actually watch them train, they're doing like functional stuff, like kettlebell swings that look like a warm up. They're doing the medicine ball tosses at the wall. They're doing like the sled pushes and stuff. And look, that stuff may be fun. I've never tried it personally yet, but they seem like they're having a great time. But then they'll complain that they can't get their chest or arms to grow, or they can't see their abs or whatever. And it's like, yeah, no shit. You're not actually in the gym training. You're just going there to work out, maybe socialize. And that's the key distinction. It's not about whether you're having fun or not. It's about whether you're creating enough stimulus. You can enjoy your training and still train hard enough to get results. Those two things, they aren't mutually exclusive. But if you say you care about your physique outcomes, if you're spending money on your appearance, if you're spending money on subs, peptides, if you're putting effort into other areas, but your training is just going through the motions or doing what you want to do on that said day, there is a disconnect there. So basically, I'm just saying, if your results really matter to you, your training, your nutrition, your plan as a whole should reflect that. And that might mean doing some exercises you don't love as much. It might mean pushing harder than what feels comfortable sometimes. But I'm telling you, once you start seeing results from training harder, from tracking your training and applying progressive overload, creating a proper stimulus, that itself becomes enjoyable because the results become the reward. Training with purpose, tracking your lifts, again, progressively overloading, training close to failure on your working sets, that's moving from suffering, which is how some people view it, but in reality, that's just training properly and what's going to yield the best results. And yeah, it's harder than doing some random exercises and kettlebell swings and throwing medicine balls at the wall, but it's also way more rewarding if you're after physique outcomes. That is an important distinction to make. If you're just going in there and you don't care about your physique outcomes, you just want to have fun, then by all means, go in there, have fun, do whatever you want, whatever style of training you're interested in, that's good on you. But if you do care, if you're thinking about your physique a lot, if it's something that bothers you, then maybe it's worth considering whether your training and your level of attention to your diet actually matches that level of care. Lastly, I do want to touch on a few other lifestyle factors before we wrap this up real quick, because training, nutrition, those are obviously the big ones, but there's also other stuff that matters too. Sleep, huge. You probably already know this, but it is worth repeating in my opinion. If you're not sleeping well, everything else suffers. And this isn't just your physique, your recovery, your performance, your body composition. It's your mental health. It's your quality of life, all of it. So make sure you've got a good sleep, wake schedule. That should never slip. Try to go to bed and wake up at the same time every night. Standardize your sleep hygiene. Get your room like a bat cave, dark, cool, quiet. Limit caffeine in the afternoon, see morning sun, all that good stuff. And look, I know a lot of people can't get perfect sleep at every point in their life. Like, I don't have kids, for example. It's easy for me to say, but try to aim for as much quality sleep as possible. If you're only getting 6 hours of sleep, make sure it's like 95% efficient. That's way better than getting 8 hours at, let's say, 60 to 70% efficiency. So maximize that sleep quality, even if you can't get the perfect quantity. Stress management, another one. So making time in your life for stress management, whether that's simple things like journaling, hitting the sauna, even meditation, using the app State for breath work before meals, my favorite personal approach, walking outside in nature, whatever works well for you, it's still going to be very beneficial as you move along that spectrum from optimal outcomes into more of a lifestyle approach. I think these things hold more and more value. Stress, super bad from us from an aging standpoint, from a health standpoint, obviously from a body composition standpoint. So finding ways to manage it is important. I've talked about how I find journaling to be really important. 10 minutes in the morning, just literally brain dump, even once a week, everything that's on your mind, super easy to do and made a massive impact for me personally. Whatever helps you down regulate your nervous system. And then last point, cardio. Now cardio, I'm going to touch on it because I didn't put it in training. It's a love or hate relationship for me. Don't love it, don't hate it, but cardio is one thing you should probably always be doing year round, or at least getting your steps in. So I would say across the course of the week, give yourself a daily step target. 10K, very generic number, but we know 10K is probably where most of the all-cause mortality benefits that are happening. Then incorporating some zone 2 cardio. This could be cycling, running, cross trainer, whatever honestly suits you as an individual and what you enjoy. And then maybe some high intensity work to build that VO2 max. Exact numbers, I don't know. If you want to be like a hybrid athlete or something, like everybody seems to want to do, it's pretty sick to be honest. Does get me intrigued sometimes for sure. Might do it myself at some point in the future after I've built a good level. I'm happy with the muscle I've built, but make sure you're getting some cardio work in. It's definitely very important, and obviously fitting that alongside the rest of your life may be difficult for some people, but there are some benefits to doing that. So to wrap this up, moving from maximum physique development to lifestyle doesn't mean you stop caring about your training and nutrition. It just means you adjust it to fit your actual life and priorities. You can train 3 to 5 days a week instead of 6. You can do a 45-minute session instead of a hour and a half or 2 hour session. You can eat 3 to 4 meals a day instead of 5 or 6. You can have more flexibility with food choices. You can go out and eat whenever you want. You can maintain a steady body weight year round instead of really pushing the bulks and then really pushing the cuts. But you still need to train hard enough to create a stimulus. You still need to have some level of structure when it comes to your nutrition. You definitely still need to prioritize recovery. Honestly, the fundamentals don't change. You kind of just adjust the dosage to match your goals and lifestyle. And I think that is the big takeaway here, is that you don't have to choose between having a body, having a physique you're proud of, and also having a life you really enjoy. You can have both. You just need to be realistic about what's required and what's actually sustainable for you to achieve both long term. There is no one size fits all answer here, which sucks, wish there was, but what works for me might not work for you. You kind of got to find what fits your life, your preferences, your schedule, your goals, but hopefully this gives you a framework to start thinking about it, and hopefully gives you some permission to train in a way that you actually enjoy while still making very, very decent progress. And just remember, this is meant to be sustainable. If you're miserable, you're not going to stick to it. If you're stressed all the time, you're not going to stick to it. So find something you can actually maintain and see yourself maintaining for years, not just weeks or months. Because at the end of the day, the best program is the one you can actually stick to. The best diet is the one you can actually maintain. The best approach is the one that fits your life while still moving you toward your goals. So that is the wrap on today's podcast. If you want 30 days of free advice, tips that'll fast track your ability to build muscle, drop body fat, have more energy, a free training plan, your nutrition, your macros set up for you, and more to transform your physique, your health, your performance, you can click the first link in the description. If you're interested for coaching, you can inquire down below as well. And I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.